It almost ups the stakes ahead of the weekend's North London derby, as if it needs to be raised anymore. So if there are any lessons to be learned by Tottenham from what Arsenal did from their move from Highbury to the Emirates, what are they?
I mean, the big problem Arsenal had was, financially, the purse strings had to be tightened. Arsene Wenger, obviously, and Arsenal lost players, running down towards the end of their contract. They're obviously ended up having to shop in, different markets because of the financial situation. So, I mean, for Spurs, they've obviously decided that they had to move to grow and develop the club. So once you make that decision, you have to learn from experiences like Arsenal, see that the pitfalls that they faced and the problems they had. And you just have to learn from how Arsenal struggled financially, really, in terms of building a squad and keeping their players. And obviously Spurs have got so many assets who, if you put them in the same situation, they could be vulnerable to losing it if they don't manage the financial situation.
But in Daniel Levy, have they got a chairman to make that happen?
Well, one of the big criticisms is that he's not prepared to bust open the safe, isn't he? It's interesting because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I read a story not long ago that they're going to have American football.
Yeah,
there.
They will, yeah.
And that will bring in revenue. So that will be extra revenue. But at what price? What price does the pitch pay for that? And so...
I think it'll be retractable, won't it?
Yeah. So it won't affect the pitch.
No,
so if it doesn't affect the pitch, so then there you go. They've learnt a lesson and they're going to make their stadium work a bit harder for themselves, unlike Arsenal. But, I mean, Arsenal were never really... they're never really a massive club. And one of the, in spending terms, one of the criticisms of Arsene Wenger is that maybe they were prepared to spend the money, but he didn't want to. This is, one of the criticisms, it's his way or no way, and that he would stick to his dogma of trying to pluck young French or African French players from obscurity and turn and polish them up himself. And that's been one of the downfalls. And they need to have a manager who's more open to the transfer market and more in tune with the transfer market and having to play the game to up the wages and to pay those fees.
Well, Jonathan Wilson of The Guardian spoke and wrote about the situation at Tottenham. This was pre-Liverpool, by the way, at the weekend. He talks about this awkwardness of the situation in which Tottenham now find themselves. Tottenham have done just about everything right. They have not overspent. They've developed talent that they either bought young or produced themselves. They've sought to increase revenues with investment in infrastructure. If football is not merely to be the propaganda wing of petro-inflated billionaires, that must be the model clubs are encouraged to follow. Yet Tottenham exist constantly in earshot of a ticking clock of players and perhaps a manager who cannot be expected to resist the lure of greater financial rewards forever. Do you relate to that, and do you think he's right?
I do, and I think more importantly, Mauricio Pochettino, I think, relates to that. Certainly that last paragraph. I know that he's starting to get frustrated. Is probably too strong a word. Twitchy is probably a little bit closer to the
unsettled.
Yeah, a bit close.
What gives you that impression then?
Well, just from noises that you hear from people that are close to him or have got close to him, that Spurs' situation, he'll take them a step forward and they'll go a step back. And he, when I say that, I'm talking about things like, getting Spurs to second, losing Kyle Walker. He'll do whatever he does this season. And obviously their league position is going to be affected because they've been away from Wembley. It will be a big factor. But then in the summer, they're likely to lose Danny Rose. So, he'll take Spurs on and then something will happen that will take them back. And I think that situation is starting to cause, a tiny little bit of frustration. And he's starting to wonder himself, how far can he take Spurs if, because if it's Danny Rose this summer, who's it going to be next year? Is it going to be Dele Alli then? Is it going to be Kane? Is it going to be Eriksen? Is it going to be Alderweireld?
Yeah.
So, he's never... Because of the financial situation, because of the money everyone else, the bigger clubs in the Premier League in Europe have got to spend, how far is he going to be able to take Spurs?
In terms of this ticking clock, we probably won't see the team or the club that Tottenham are going to become for 2 years yet.
Yeah.
Because they'll go back, if they go back next season to the new stadium, if it's ready, there'll be a transition year. Everybody will talk about that, getting back used to this new stadium, new surroundings, new atmosphere, all that sort of stuff. So it's only then when we judge them in 18 months to 2 years' time. And whether that's enough in the short careers of this current crop of players is up for debate.
And they're up against their North London rivals, for whom the clock has often been spoken of ticking, for their manager in Arsene Wenger. It was after what happened against Swansea in the previous game, they go and thump Everton 5-1. It was typical Arsenal in many respects, wasn't it?
Very much so. Feel-good factor, a couple of new signings. Everything's hunky-dory again at Arsenal because Aubameyang scored on his debut and Mkhitaryan set up 3 goals. But I mean, let's see how they are this weekend against Tottenham in a big game. Let's see what Mkhitaryan, now he's left the kind of situation he was in at Manchester United, not getting on with Mourinho and being given the chance to flourish. Let's see whether he can dominate a big game against Tottenham and produce what he did against Everton.
There seems to be this impression that he almost had this last throw of the dice in the transfer market by bringing in players like Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang, who are in that bracket age group-wise, 28, 29, who Wenger would never have previously ever gone close to. So it begs the question, are they actually his acquisitions, or have they been made by somebody above him?
This is what Adrian was saying, discussing earlier, that whether it's Wenger's last throw of the dice or whether it's somebody else's new throw of the dice, and that power is shifting away from him.
Sven Mislintat's come in from Dortmund, isn't he, as the new head of recruitment?
Yeah, and you've seen... You couldn't see a greater transition between the end of a window and the start of the next phase of the season with this. I mean, we're writing off Everton, but normally any team that operates under Sam Allardyce would not go down 5-1 in the way that they did, even against Arsenal. And it shows that they're the electrifying and the electric shock adjectives are just sum it up perfectly. It's just this, and what it must do is make it even more frustrating for the fans who've had to put up with the other stuff, should we say, for the rest of it prior to this. So it's typical Arsenal, isn't it? Chameleons.
I think Wenger, you talk about are they Wenger signings? I think Sven has had to lean on Wenger quite a lot to get them through. I think initially he wasn't too sure about Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan for whatever reason. You might think that's strange because of Aubameyang, his scoring record. Mkhitaryan, the class he has shown maybe at Dortmund more so than Manchester United. You might think that's quite strange, but that's Wenger. He takes his time on his signings. He's a bit indecisive. Does he fit into that mould of player that Dillo talked about that he wants? The gem, the younger player that he wants to develop. But this is Ivan Gazidis spoke last season about needing a catalyst for change. It's taken a little while, but obviously in the structures that they're now putting around Wenger, there is a change. He's not, it's not his say and his say only. There are other people who are having influence on what goes on at Arsenal. We're seeing that with the players that came in the last month. Interesting
story in your paper this week where John Cross, who I think if anybody knows Arsenal, it's Crossy, isn't it? About that Wenger admitted he may have made a mistake over the Sanchez deal by not selling him earlier.
In the summer,
Which again lends to this theory that maybe someone somewhere is manoeuvring the old man somewhat and is pointing out a few of his... Perhaps he doesn't know everything. And that was an interesting story because there were no quotes, and I always like the ones where there are no quotes. There are no quotes, so I always think that's a true story, especially if it's got Crossy's name on it.
But also, I mean, the thing is, Amy Lawrence actually wrote about it in The Guardian, just in terms of the impact that was made by Henrik Mkhitaryan, because it was so positive, and the verve that it gives Arsene Wenger's team. Arsenal's new number 7 added such value to the side, not only in the hat-trick of assists, but just generally the impressive mixture of deft touches and determined attitude, but also in the way he opens up the path to play differently, based around a double creative pivot with Mesut Ozil. This is interesting, the next bit. If there was a lack of trust shown to him by Jose Mourinho, Wenger is only too delighted to give Mkhitaryan plenty of it. Express yourself, enjoy yourself, be yourself, show how much you love football. Is it as easy as that?
I think he's probably better suited to Arsenal because he's just going to have so much movement going around, taking place in front of him, players making angles for him, giving him options. I think at Manchester United under Mourinho had to be a little bit more aware of defensive responsibilities and maybe stuff that was going on, behind him. And I just think he'll probably fit in a little bit better at Arsenal. And maybe it is as simple as that, arm around his shoulder, go and enjoy yourself rather than worry about the defensive side of the game.
It's way too early to make judgment calls, I'm afraid. Let's see, we're too late in the season, but if they were going up to Everton, Everton away, let's see if they would have played like that and whether Mkhitaryan would have been working around a double creative pivot or not. You know what happens to double creative pivots under Sam Allardyce's team at Goodison Park? You have to pick them down off the floodlights.
That's a very good point in terms of taking time to judge somebody like Mkhitaryan because, he started the season great and then as soon as Manchester United were relying on him to be their chief creator when Pogba was injured, he disappeared. He went into his shell. So it's all very well doing it in a game where, your team are winning 4-0 at half-time and the opposition don't look very interested, can you win a game like the North London derby at Wembley?
It's a bit of scepticism from these two, and hopefully Arsenal fans will have more answers than questions after the North London derby.